In today's episode, we are going to be answering a question from one of our listeners, and it talks about following the energy and using the connection codes in all areas of life, not just in your marriage, as well as is oohing enough? Like, this listener is having a hard time identifying emotions within himself. Like, she's asking about her husband struggling with his own emotional read. And so we are so glad that you are here. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and with ourselves. I am your host, Tira Wages, and I am here with Dr. Glenn Hill, who is a marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, and he is sitting next to his very best friend and bride, Phyllis Hill, who together they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the science of human connection. We're glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Yeah, my goodness. So it's been quite the, I would say, roller coaster the last couple of days, especially, I think, for me. And I think, let's see, 2 days ago, woke up to a text from our youngest daughter that shared that her high school friend's mom had passed away just that morning.
Yeah.
And which I knew her as well. And so it's kind of pulled us into that season of slowing down and having to jump into, just that world. And the funeral, the celebration of her life is coming up in 2 days. And they've asked me to be a part of that. And, and when you do that, I've just thought so much about the first time I met her, and just, she was a single mom with 2 girls, and how she just wanted something very different for her kids' lives.
Yeah.
And she did so many things that put her in places that were very uncomfortable.
Right.
And being a part of our homeschool group was one of those places, because she was different. Most of the rest of us were married, had family, had lots of kids, and where she was a single mom with 2 girls. And just thinking a lot about her and what that took, for her to step into places that were really uncomfortable. And, and I think about that even just with the overall connection codes and how we have been doing things a certain way for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And to get to that place where you go, you know what, I want something different.
Yeah.
And at times that puts you in uncomfortable places. That puts you in, like, this is not easy for me, and tuning in. And, I'm glad we're answering a specific email today, because it kind of goes down that road of, if this doesn't come easy, is it just like, oh, well, I'm not doing this because it doesn't come easy? Or do you go, you know what, this is really, really important, and I want to see a change in myself, but also realizing that if I change myself, it's going to have a rippling effect on my children, on my friends, on my neighbors. And I think often we don't think about that our actions, our changes do affect everyone around us.
100%. And I'm actually really, really glad that you are saying that specifically, just the rippling effect of how this can change your life. And hearing from a parent, that wanted something different for her daughters. And you've told me a little bit about her and just some of the things that y'all experience in life with each other, and the type of home she wanted to create for her kids. And it just makes me think of how this has to become habit. Like, if we want to change our lives, we need to create habits around what we want our life to be. And so after we're done recording this specific episode, we're going to record an episode about habits, about this very thing of how to actually do this daily, and what you need to do to make it work daily, especially going into the new year, the holidays,
So good.
because so many people are wanting to change their life.
Yeah.
And we know that this is the tool to do it. And it also makes me think that about so many people that are hurting this holiday season. And we just did a podcast about grief. So scroll just a few back and listen to the grief podcast, because we are in the season of so much joy. And on the flip side, so much grief is happening right now.
Yeah.
So it's so important to
Yeah,
acknowledge.
and I was just going to say it's a cultural moray, which I think probably is interwoven with the psychology world. People say, "Oh, well, you can't change anybody else. You can't control anybody else," and I guess technically, sort of, that's true. But we have incredible effects on other people. You know, Tira, if I walk in your house and I'm rude to you, well, that affects you.
Right.
And I guess we would love to say, "Oh, well, that shouldn't ruin Tira's day." Well, yeah. I mean, I want her to, I don't know, have some wherewithal within herself that Glenn doesn't ruin her day, but it's going to affect her because I matter to you. I'm really, really significant in your life.
Yeah.
And so if I treat you poorly, okay, fine. I'm not changing you. I'm not controlling you, but I kind of am. I mean,
Yeah.
I do have effect. So there's a delicate balance in that. But it's a silly notion to say, "Oh, well, we don't, everybody's stuff is just on them." It's just not true. We have so much effect on people
Yeah.
around us. And again, I'm not trying to argue the semantics of it, but if we change that mentality to go, well, that's Tira's stuff. If I treated her poorly and she is, messes with her, that's her problem. Well, that's a silly notion. That's just
Yeah.
not true at all. Because that's not the human condition. That's not how humans function.
Right. And that leads right into what this question is. Exactly. And so this wife wrote in that said, "What should a wife do to encourage her husband to process emotion when he seems to be denying that any emotions are happening? If he's logistically minded and doesn't have an interest in discussing emotion, is it enough that he is willing to ooh me so I can process my emotion? I feel loneliness and that the connection codes such as the oohing and following the energy aren't used in other areas of his life, like with our kids and other situations. But I don't know how to convince him of being all in. Is this typical for men?"
Well, immediately I go to, this is not a man or woman thing. There's definitely a lot of men out there that would say, "Whoa, wait, I do this. I'm much more in tune with my emotions." And I know in our relationship, I relate a lot more to that email as the male. Like, I have a much harder time tuning in. So I don't think it's men have a harder time and women do this more easily. I think that it can be difficult for different ones of us. It's not
Right.
because we're female or male. And, like it mentions the word logistic. I'm a very logistical person. I'm a very task oriented person. And so that's where my brain kind of goes to first instead of to the emotion. And, for me, as many of the listeners have heard my story, that I didn't even think I had emotion
Yeah.
until I was 50. And then it was because my body forced it, I had to face that reality.
Right.
And it was the shutting down. And I think that, especially when I have the opportunity, I say to crowds when we're speaking that I don't want you to wait until you have a crisis, a physical health crisis that gets your attention.
Right.
And, looking back, even prior to my own story, I think, yeah, I knew and I've known people who, it's not until they have a heart attack that they change their lifestyle.
Right.
Or they have another, scare of some kind. And it's like, oh, you mean we should choose a better lifestyle? And part of that lifestyle is tuning into what's happening with us.
Right.
And it's figuring out, it's like our body does store what we are dealing with. And, it's the book that's so great, The Body Keeps the Score, kind of shows you that it's stored in your body, but at some point it's going to come out
Right.
in different ways at different times. And it's not even an age thing. I mean, you can see it at times in children at a young age where it's coming out of their bodies through different things. And so it's a learned, it's a big change, but it is something that it's like you got to believe in it to go, you know what, this is super important. Just like all the other changes we can make in our lives where we go, you know what, I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to start walking or exercising because it's better. It's for the longevity of my life.
Yeah.
and dealing with your emotions, learning what they are, tuning in, and learning those methods. For the longevity of your life.
Right.
And it changes so much in how we just tune into ourselves. And for some of us, that's easier than others.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to make this a part of your daily life where
Yeah.
you're just slowing down enough to figure out what is happening for me.
Yeah, and it's also quality of life in the moment. We've shared my popcorn story, movie popcorn story here before, and it was an incredible joy experience, gorging on movie popcorn. And then I
Yeah.
felt horrible, for at least for a day, sometimes a couple of days afterwards, because my body's rejecting this thing that I did, going, this is not good for us, for my body systems. So it is, there is a joy experience in the moment, but quality of life, it's not worth it because
Right.
it costs me so much over the next few hours, the next day. And that's just as true for emotions. I did want to mention too that Phyllis said that it's not always true men versus women thing, which is definitely true. Every human's unique. I think culturally, typically, men struggle with this more. We have so many sayings that we say to boys. We say boys don't cry. We don't really say girls don't cry.
Right.
We wish that they wouldn't, or at least go in a closet by themselves. And just don't let us know about it.
Yeah.
But we actually tell boys, and we say to them, don't act like a little girl.
Yeah.
We don't really say don't act like a little boy. We say man up. There is no woman up. That's not a saying in our culture. We say grow a pair, boy. We don't say grow a pair of ovaries, girl. So there are things that we are very prejudicial towards men and males as far as being human, as far as existing, as far
Yeah.
as experiencing what they're experiencing. But again, every human's unique, and it's certainly pretty much opposite that scenario in our relationship.
Right. And I do totally agree with you that is the social norm for how we treat boys versus girls. But there is still the truth of like girls are told to go hide in the closet. You're too emotional. You're too dramatic. You're too much. And so how you're raised, and I think that also has to do with if you're raised by a father that was man up, don't cry, if he's a much harder person, then I think that's where you can affect both the females and the males of the house of not being too emotional. When I read this, my first question, if she was sitting here with us, the wife, I would ask, are you doing the core emotion wheel every day? Like that would be my first question, because it does sound like he has made strides in oohing her and showing up to let her process what's happening for her. But that's why it's so important to do the actual wheel, because that is what teaches you to identify the emotions within yourself. And maybe he does sit there and he says like, well, I didn't feel anger today, or I didn't feel guilt today. And so one of the tips that you have had for people that don't necessarily identify where it hit them that day is to make something up. Well, then if you can't think of a time, either the most recent time you felt it, then make it up. And so I've done that with my kids. And so when I'm like, when did you feel lonely today? Sometimes my son will be like, well, I didn't feel lonely. Well, can you think of a time you did? And he's like, no, but being on an island by myself. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that would be really lonely. And then it teaches him what that feels like.
Yep.
And even last night, oh my gosh, I got emotional telling Wes about this. I always have time with my daughter before bed. And she reached over behind her and grabbed the core emotion wheel off of her nightstand and put it between us. And I didn't even know it was in her room. I thought it was in the boys' room. And I was like, ooh, yeah, okay. And then she flipped it upside down. And I like to look at the wheel when I'm doing it. It helps my brain not have to think as much. But I was like, I flipped it back up. And she flipped it back upside down. I was like, well, no, we can look at it. We don't touch it, but we can look at it. She said, no, I want to be able to do it without looking. We try not to cry. That way, when I'm at school, if I feel sad, I will be able to know that I felt sad. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. Like, this is the whole reason we are doing this. That way, when she is alone and I am not with her to pull out a magnet for her, she can know what's happening in her body and process it.
Wow.
And so that is what I would tell this couple to do. Every single night, He needs to sit, or I would encourage him to sit. And if he can't think of a recent time he felt it, make it up. And then over time, he will start to connect his brain and what is happening in his body.
Yeah, and we cover that on for most people. Most connection coders have the wheel laminated on the back of it. It has the rules of the wheel, and one of the rules of the wheel is as current as possible, if not current, than the last time you can remember this emotion happening. If not last time, then a big time could be when you're in 5th grade, and if not a big time, then making something up. Because we now know that even making something up. If I said to you, I felt fear last week when that drug cartel kidnapped me and took me to Mexico. It activates the fear region of my brain. All we're trying to do is reactivate so we recognize it so that tomorrow afternoon, and it's the 3 phrases, I literally go, oh, what just happened for me? What am I missing? To be able to say, turn to Phyllis, go, I just felt some fear. I felt some fear about whatever, about finances, about, the roof is leaking. And to be able to recognize that, we're just training you and technically retraining, because you did this well when you were 12 months old. We're just retraining the brain to recognize the emotion in the moment.
Yeah, I think the argument some people would have for this goes back to what you were saying, Phyllis, is, and I don't know this man, so he specifically may not say this, but I've been in conversations where somebody's like, but I don't want to be able to identify fear.
Yeah.
Why do I want to train my body to know what fear feels like, or anger or guilt or whatever? But this goes back to what you were saying. Just because you're not recognizing it doesn't mean your body's not experiencing it.
Right.
Your body is still holding that fear in. It's still holding that guilt and that shame and everything else. But you're not letting it out then, so your body is keeping the score.
Right.
And so it's so important that you are able to say, like, ooh, this is fear that I'm experiencing. That way you're not just walking in your house and being rude to your kids or your wife because you don't know, your body is dysregulated, but you don't know what's causing dysregulation. If you can now pinpoint, oh, it's fear that's dysregulating me.
Yeah.
I can now say this out loud. I can process with my safe partner, and we can carry on with the night without there being tension in our home.
Yeah, and people find it hard to believe. One of the things we do when we do presenting the foundations is that emotions are your guide. They're your consultant. They're serving a purpose. And for most people, their response is, yeah, it does serve a purpose. It ruins my day. It ruins my marriage. It ruins my life. It ruins my family. But the purpose is to cue you in. We now know that the brain doesn't distinguish physical from emotional pain. So the equivalent of that for me is that someone says, well, I don't want to recognize it when I get a splinter under my fingernail. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Of course you want to recognize that, because if you don't, at some point it's going to get infected. I don't know if your finger's going to fall off or you get blood poisoning and die. So I'm not trying to get people to have splinters under their fingernails. That's not our goal. That's already happening. So since it's happening, I want you to be able to go, ow, that hurt. And then you pull the splinter out of your fingernail. Good. Because it's already happening. It'd be one thing to say, well, we're just going to eliminate all splinters in life so that nobody ever gets a splinter under the fingernail. Well, I guess for voting, I don't know. I mean, but that's not even possible. It's irrelevant. So, as you said, and what Phyllis says so much, when we were first learning the connection codes ourselves, is that she was experiencing so much sadness with her mom passing. And she would say, well, I don't have time to be sad. I don't want to feel sad. I'd go, babe, I'm not trying to get you to feel sad. You already feel sad.
Yeah.
I just want you to allow yourself to feel that sadness. She's like, I'm too busy. I got too much to get done. I'm like, babe, I'm not trying to get you to be sad. You're already sad.
Yeah.
And she eventually was able, and she was a tough case, but she eventually was able to slow down enough to recognize that. And it was amazing when we would do that. It was literally a minute, 2 minutes that the sadness would process. That does not mean it wouldn't happen again in 10 minutes or an hour or this afternoon or tomorrow. And that's fine. We'll just do it again then. But when she would process it, it would be a 20, 30-second process instead of an hour and a half.
Right.
And the math on that is pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
There's so much importance around emotional health. And if we need to really see that as, oh, this is a big deal. Educate yourself on it and then make it a part of your lifestyle.
Right.
Which is where the connection codes all comes in. Like that's the whole point of the core emotion wheel. That's the whole point of all these things that we have created and have put together to simplify how to get to really emotional health. How do we do that?
I think that, and again, every human's unique, therefore every couple's unique. So it's very difficult to say, oh, well, you just do this, A plus B equals C. It's very difficult to do that with human behavior. But I would still encourage her to use the 3 phrases to just keep following his energy, find out. So what that looks like is she says to him, hey, babe, what's happening for you? Catch me up. What am I missing? And he goes, oh, nothing. She goes, oh, well, what's that like? That nothing's happening for you. And you just follow the energy. And Phyllis and I have gotten more and more fine-tuned in that because there are lots of times that I'll ask her what's happening, and she says, well, nothing really. And there actually is, there's 3 or 4 or 5 emotions happening for her. She's just not really, it's not on the tip of her tongue. It's not right there at the surface. And then when she pauses for, again, I'm not talking about 10 minutes, for 5 to 10 seconds, she goes, oh, well, I was feeling some sadness about this, and I was feeling some fear about this. And this is what most people do. They, because every human has the right of request. We do not have the right of demand. And what most people do is go, you need to be telling me your emotions. Well, I do not know the human on the planet that's going to invite in.
Yeah.
I do know the vast majority of humans that I know that's going to shut them out. That's going to shut them down. And it sounds correct. And, we always say you can be totally correct and absolutely wrong. So for me to say to Phyllis, well, there's some emotion happening. Dr. Glenn says there always is. So you just need to get in touch with it and tell me. I just pushed her away from me. And I'm totally correct. Information-wise, logistics-wise, I'm correct. I'm absolutely wrong. Relationally, it just doesn't sell to people. Whereas if I'm able to ooh her again and continue following her energy and go, oh, so babe, what's that like to not be aware of any emotion at all, and to even not have any emotion at all. I'll just, follow her presentation, and she will get to the emotion very, very quickly. But if I resist her energy and go, come on, babe, Dr. Glenn says we're supposed to use the connection codes. Tell me. I just made it worse, not better. From a good heart, good intention, good motivation, it just doesn't work.
Right. And I keep thinking about the fact that why doing the will, because there may be one emotion that you do identify with that he may feel more often, or that another husband or spouse, that the wife is like, oh my gosh, this is my partner, or the husband is thinking that. There may be one that they do think that they feel a lot, but it's so important that you get the right emotion. Because like for me, especially before the connection codes, I would think that I could be angry real quick. And so I have a lot of secondary anger where in reality I'm feeling fear, but the anger is what's coming out, or I'm feeling shame, but it's the anger that's coming out. Even this morning, Wes and I were like conquering conflict over here in our house, and he presented what emotion he was feeling. And then we started to be like, things got a little dicey for a second. And then he came back. He was like, well, actually, I was feeling loneliness before I was feeling shame.
Wow.
And so him getting back to that original one that he felt made all the difference. Yep. But he didn't process the loneliness when it happened in the kitchen.
Yep.
He processed the shame when it happened in the bathroom. And then he presented of, here are the 3 things that he didn't say that you've done wrong today, but here are the 3 things that have messed up today. Where I took it of like, here's all these things I've done wrong this morning. But if he had been able to recognize that first time when it happened, it would have tuned in faster and we could have worked through things quicker. So by doing the will every single day and being able to say, oh, that was the fear. Oh, this is the shame. This is the guilt.
Absolutely.
Then it helps him, the husband or the wife that's also struggling identifying their emotions, process it so much faster. And it's not so messy. It makes them not as fearful of emotion, where right now they're like, whoa, I don't want to do that emotion thing because that's too much. It's too much. I don't want to feel that. But now if you're able to be like, oh, wow, I was just hit with loneliness, it doesn't feel like it's too much.
Yeah. And here's the thing that we tell couples all the time. It is going to take X number of times doing this before it becomes smooth, automatic. We don't know what X is. It might be 7, it might be 36, it might be 190. We have no idea. So hurry up. And what most people do is say, well, I tried it once, it didn't work. Well, yeah, it's going to take X number of times of doing it because we've been, we use the phrase walking sideways emotionally for so long. We haven't been doing this for so long that it would be a little odd if it worked perfectly the first time. That's just not how humans function. You can't automatically be a great bowler, a great tennis player. It takes a whole bunch of practice. So we're practicing here That's part of the design of the core emotion wheel. And we're practicing throughout the day to learn to follow the energy, to learn to be present with the other person. And another Connection Codes protocol is to always go back to the first unprocessed emotion. I'm amazed when we're doing sessions and this couple had this huge conflict, this big fight. And that's one of the things we ask is, so what was the first unprocessed emotion for this couple, not for the individual, because it might have been, we don't know, whether, because what it might look like is what we call the presenting problem is the wife got upset about this, but something was happening before that with him. And again, it can be vice versa. So we always go back to the first unprocessed emotion. And I don't like saying never with humans. I don't think we've ever not seen that be effective. When we go back to the first unprocessed emotion, it unpacks everything, and then they get it. Is that fair? I don't like saying always and never, but I think that always changes certainly the narrative, but also their dynamic drastically when they go back and realize, oh, that was what was happening at first. And what we noticed was the second, third, or fourth emotion, but actually it was way back before that, which could include joy, by the way. We forget that. If I'm able to convey the joy to you at the beginning, because I may be experiencing joy, I don't tell you, and then my joy gets crushed, and then there's a tremendous amount of sadness, hurt, whatever, wounding in that process.
Yeah, that's literally actually what happened this morning. Wes felt joy about something.
Yeah, he texted me. He told me the whole story. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, no, he felt joy about something.
You thought he really did.
And he wants a new dishwasher, and I don't want a new, we're not spending money on that. And I shut it down immediately. And then he came back and he was like, man, I was just feeling a lot of joy thinking about the future of having a new dishwasher. And so even joy is something that when unprocessed can then lead to hurt or sad or whatever. And so that's why it's so important to be able to actually do the wheel every day so you can clue into what that first emotion was. And if you are like, well, then where do we even access this thing? You can go to our website. We have a free download available under the Core Emotion Wheel tab, where all you have to do, put in your email address. You will get an email. You'll get a video watching us do it, which we also do at the end of every episode. But now you can print it off. You can put it on your fridge or in your kid's bedroom and actually do this with them daily. And so it makes me think, talking about the kids, something else she mentioned is that he's having a hard time following the energy of his kids or oohing his kids. He's doing a great job oohing her, which that's incredible. That's step one. That's so good. But he's struggling applying it to the other areas of his life. Yeah. And as a mom with 4 young kids who, my oldest, it's clicking with them, but my youngest, they can identify they're sad. They can identify certain things, but that secondary anger comes in hot at my house. There's a lot of secondary anger happening. Yeah. And I have a hard time oohing my kids compared to me being able to ooh Wes. So I definitely identify with that. And so what is something that he could do or that she can help him do to slow that down?
Well, I think that with parenting, and we do have a parenting masterclass where we really take these tools and show how they work with kids of all ages. Yeah. I think sometimes we don't ourselves talk about the way we want to parent our children, the end result. Like for us, we wanted to break generational curses. Like we wanted something different for our kids. And it was like we knew what not to do. We just didn't know what to do. Right. So we were learning as we went along. And, what's hard with that is you kind of go, well, okay, so y'all are choosing this path, but how do you know what this is going to look like in 20 years or 10 years? It's like, will you have then go, oh, well, that was the wrong path. So I get it that sometimes with parenting, we find ourselves just doing how our parents parented us. Right. Even though we say, I don't want to do that. Yeah. But it's like, that's kind of that again, that's that automatic go-to because that's what's kind of stuck in our head. So you have to be real intentional. And with parenting, I think we do. We want what's best. We want our kids to just be good people. Like we want them to behave. We want them to obey. We want our kids to be good people. Totally get that. It's realizing what is the path that we are on with our kids.
Yeah.
What is the end going to look like? And it's kind of one of those where you go, okay, I want to be deeply connected with my kids when they are 18, when they're 25, when they're 30.
Yeah.
So what am I doing now to pave that way?
Right.
And yes, we have to work with logistics. Like you got to put your shoes on before you go to school, because that's one of the rules of school. You got to, get on that school bus, you got to have shoes.
Right.
So there are logistics in our life that we have to deal with our kids. But in the moments where you can back off and look, are we staying connected, or are we simply fighting for obedience? That's the number one thing. I want my kids to obey me. Okay, well, that you kind of got to say, well, where will that get you when they're 20?
Yeah.
Where will they get you when they're 25? But if we can actually see the beauty of emotional connection in our families, we realize we're really building something that when they are 20, we can still have that.
Right.
We can have that emotional connection with our kids. And the teenage years, often it's like, wow, are we making space for our kids and all that they're wanting to learn, all that they are wanting to experience? Are we trying to keep everybody in one line? Because that's a difficult journey.
Yeah.
And that it could work. It can work through the time that they live at home. But then are you looking ahead to beyond that? Are you wanting your kids to get to that age where they're like, see ya, I'm out of here?
Right.
Or are you building something where you can emotionally stay connected so that you can go through those times where they're choosing things you don't approve of?
Right.
And do you go, well, this is it. This is where we lose our kids. And, for the next 40 years until we die, we don't even know where our kids are.
Yeah.
Or are you able to build something emotionally? And, it is interesting. We were talking to a very successful family. So we were talking to the parents, and we met the kids as well. And it's like the dad is very, very successful. So he's like, I know how to get my kids to be successful. And what he's missing is that's all logistical.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you have all the wisdom in the world. You have built an empire, and you can tell your kids and teach your kids how to build an empire. And I'm sure even as you're listening, you probably know that it's not going very well,
Right.
because his kids are like, that's not what they want.
Yeah.
And it's like realizing your kids are wanting emotional connection with you, not that you're logistically telling them how to do everything correctly. They don't want that.
Right.
And, and I think that if we could just slow down and realize, wow, really what our kids desire so much, because you're going to blow it as a parent. Oh my word. But when you are emotionally connected, you're able to even go back and go, I think I really missed it with you. I got really angry, and I was feeling a lot of fear that you were going to do this. And so I reacted really poorly. I just missed it with you.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful narrative when we can go to our kids and talk about how we missed it with them.
Yeah.
And it teaches them how to be able to have that same language,
Yeah.
which is beautiful.
Yeah, so much power in that. It's the third phrase. I missed it, or what am I missing? I think I might have missed something there, and that's such an incredible invitation for the other person to say, "Yeah, I felt wounded by this." But with this family you were just referencing, and they have kids into their 20s, all the way down to I think 10 or so. But as each child gets into the teen years, they just stop listening altogether. They have zero interest in the parents, and the dad especially. And the parents recognize that now, that, they don't listen to anything we have to say. And the dad's just flustered. He's like, I could teach them so much. I have all this wisdom. They're not listening to a word you're saying. And it's interesting because in psychology, and of course you never know, is psychology reflecting the culture or is psychology affecting the culture? And we can't prove or disprove that. But in psychology, we've actually begun saying, that's correct. Teenagers are supposed to move away from their parents. They're supposed to rebel. They're supposed to become more and more, adversarial, antagonistic. But what we don't recognize is these parents have been telling these kids for a decade to just shut up. I don't want to hear about your experience. I don't want to hear. They don't use those words, although
Right.
plenty of parents do. But a lot of times parents don't. They go like, I've never told my kids to shut up. Well, but we have. We've shut them out. We've said, stop being so emotional. Stop being so upset. You just need to accept that. It's just the way it is. And so somewhere around when they're, 12, 13, 14, 15, they finally get the message that, oh, mom and dad don't care. Mom and dad don't want to hear what's happening with me. Got it. And that's when we end up sitting in sessions with these parents who are like, my kids have shut me out. Well, that's because you've been shutting them out for a decade. And I'm not agreeing or condoning. I'm just telling you what happened. And if we do that with our kids, and frequently this starts when the kids are 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, we're constantly, and they fall down and they get hurt. We say, you're okay. Stop crying. You're okay. You're going to be fine. You just disregarded their experience. Therefore,
Right.
you disregarded the person. And you do that for 10 years, and they're going to be 13 years old, and they're going to go find somebody who will be safe for them. They're going to go find somebody who will be present with them, because these parents have not from a bad intention. I'm not judging the parents. I think that the vast majority of parents want goodness for their kids. They're trying to help. But what they've actually done is shut their kids down for a decade. Finally, the kids get the message. Mom and dad are never going to be present with me, are never going to be safe for me, don't really care about me, which again, from the parent side, yes, I get it. The parents really care. But I'm talking about what the child is experiencing. And if the child experiences that enough times, they finally go, oh, okay, I quit. I'm out of here. And again, in the psychology world, we're like, oh, that's healthy. That's good. That's not healthy. It's incredibly damaging. That's the very time, well, and it's throughout the lifespan, but that's the very time that they desperately need connection with their parents, where
Right.
they need safety with them, and they just shut it out and they move away.
Right. So I think about this email, her asking and saying that he has a hard time oohing his kids. And I said like that I also struggle with that at times. And something that I have realized for our family, which I think that he would probably be very similar in, is that he's having a hard time oohing his kids because he is not able to identify what's happening for himself
Yeah. Yeah.
when his kids are either not listening or having an outburst or whatever the issue is that he's not able to ooh them through. He is being, an emotion is firing in him.
Yep.
He can identify that emotion. And so therefore he is now projecting onto his kids whatever it is because he's dysregulated. When we as parents are dysregulated, we can't ooh our kids. It makes me think of just a couple of weeks ago, we went to a meeting, the three of us, and then came home from the meeting, and my two littles were home, and the smallest, the 3-year-old, found a red pen and took it to my brand new couch that I have been waiting 10 years for a new couch. We walk in the door, there is red pen all down the side of this couch. And I am like trying to stay calm because Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill are in my house watching this moment happen. And I want to throw things across the room. I'm flooded with anger because my kid just drew on my couch. And as we stepped back and I processed and I kept thinking what is actually happening, we reached the moment where I looked at Dr. Glenn and Phyllis and I was like, you know what? I'm not angry at him necessarily. That's not the real emotion. I'm flooded with shame right now. I have shame that I thought I could have something nice in my house, that I've made this large purchase thinking that I can actually have something nice. And I have shame, but I'm projecting that shame now onto my 3-year-old as anger, you know? And I think that is often what we do as parents. We are hit with shame because our kid is having a tantrum in the grocery store. So now we can't ooh our kid in the grocery store and be like, ooh, I know you want this toy. I get that. You're sad because you can't, or they're like, what's happening to you? You're sad. Because we're shame in our body. We've got to get out of here. Now you're getting a spanking when we get to the car, or your other toy taking away, or whatever, where we're reacting from our emotion. So I would say for this dad, being able to process and ooh other people outside of his wife, he's got to learn what emotion's firing in him in those intense moments. That has been revolutionary for me.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Because we sit with couples all the time, they're like, "Oh, I could never do that with my pick a number 8-year-old, 15-year-old. I couldn't do that with my kids." kids are blown away by this. And we hear continuously from so many couples that say, I shared authentically with my kids, and my kids were just mesmerized. That and they will say, especially if they're old enough to articulate it, Dad, I didn't know that you experienced anything. I've never heard you share anything like that, anything authentic. Now the dad is in a position of vulnerability, which begs for safety. Now this 10-year-old is able to see the dad as a real human and is able to be it's just amazing the dynamic that it shifts. Again, I don't believe in magic fairy dust, but darn near. I mean, it's almost instantaneous, almost guaranteed. I don't doubt that there can be exceptions to that. But for this dad to present authentically to his wife, to his kids, to whoever, changes the whole dynamic and the interaction very, very quickly. I also just wanted to mention that, again, we have the right of request for this wife just to keep asking, because she would be totally correct to say to him, well, you need to be authentic with the kids. You need to be sharing authentically with the kids. That is correct and absolutely wrong. That will never sell to anybody on the planet. And it doesn't work relationally, but for her to say to him, and even for her to convey the emotion, babe, I feel some sadness when I see you at odds with the kids. I feel pain in that because you're such a great guy. I want your kids to connect with you for life, for always. And, they can gain so much from you, but I see, that you struggle with this, whatever, relationship with this one. And I just feel so much joy about the idea of you connecting with them. Hey, could you, next time, just ooh them? Could you do that? Again, not magic fairy dust, but very close. I rarely ever see people say, nope, not doing it. The vast, vast, vast majority of the time, people go, yeah, that might be tough for me, but yeah, I think I could do that next time. I sure can try. And we just change the dynamic, which, again, it's not instant, but over really a period of days, weeks at the most, it changes the whole setup.
Yeah. I think that was so helpful. And I love that she emailed in and asked these questions because I think so many couples have this difference in their home. Just like there's one couple that typically has a higher sex drive than the other. Most couples are not going to be the same.
Right.
There's going to be opposites attract. And so one of you may be more in tune with what's happening in your body and the other one may need to practice the will more often so they can start identifying it within themselves. I think it's such a common issue. And so thank you. And if you have any questions, if this is sparking something in you of ooh, we're struggling with this in my house, please send us an email, info@connectioncodes.co, and either ask the question or say, hey, can I come on in session on a podcast and us talk through this issue? Because we would absolutely love to have you. We are here creating this podcast for you. We're not doing it for ourselves, but we are doing it so you can take these tools into your house. And so before we close out, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis are actually going to go through the core emotion wheel together of what they've experienced most recent with the emotions that are happening in their body.
So good.
So for me, I think almost everything will be about just my mom and her health scare last day and a half or so. A lot of pain, a lot of sadness in that. Just, she's almost 95, and just her life story and her life experiences. And it's so difficult for her to be authentic and to be vulnerable and to be in a position of vulnerability. So I just feel her sadness in that. Loneliness, being up late with you last night, and you're phenomenal with her, a lot of joy in that. But just not knowing, thinking, my gosh, are we supposed to be calling somebody? I don't know what the right thing to do there. And a lot of fear in that what is the right thing? Is there a exact right thing?
Right.
And I'm thankful that we have a doctor in our family that we can call continuously and say, okay, this is what's happening. What do we do? What do we do? And our kids are very much there for us, but still there's just some loneliness, just the not knowing. A lot of hurt. I have quite a story with my mom. We were estranged so much of our life, and just the woundings, the trauma, at times difficult for me to be present with her now because of the things that I experienced with her over the years. anger in that, it's like, dang, family can actually be very, very beautiful, can be amazing. And my family of origin, we missed on that big time, which of course
Yeah.
affects me to this day, affects you, affects so many people. Shame in that, guilt and shame, guilt that I'm not better, with my mom, that it is a struggle, and shame in that, like, dang it, I'm a connection coder. I should be good at this. But it becomes a challenge so often for me. A lot of joy just being with you in this. So thankful that you're partnering with me in it, because it is such a challenge, such a struggle, and it's still a difficult scenario, but there's so much joy getting to go through it with you. I would do anything with you, and I love doing anything with you. And not that that's fun, the struggles with my mom, but
Yeah.
just the fact that we get to do it together. A lot of value in that for me.
Thank you. Did you mention anger?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You dozed off.
I guess
I showed
so.
that part.
Well, okay. So for me, definitely, there was a fear factor yesterday, with her, and, that was real. For me, there was a lot of, sadness because seeing her yesterday took me back to my mom. I was with my mom, at the end of her life, and I was with her by myself, staying with her when she had a stroke, and there were some similarities yesterday. And so I think that was a really big one for me. Just felt a lot of that. And then, I know at one point you were in the office, and I was by myself kind of keeping an eye on your mom, and just felt really lonely. So I called you and just said, can you come and just sit with me? Like, this is just a lot. And so, yeah, joy that we could just lean on each other through the day yesterday. Anger that prescription drugs are such a big part of people's lives, and she had taken too much yesterday, which is what kind of sent her into, she was just couldn't wake her up. And so, definitely anger there, that it's like, man, that it's so easily accessible to her. Like, she has so much of that, and she just took too much. So definitely that my anger there. Guilt and shame, I was thinking, okay, when did that fire? And I think it was actually the day before, during a session I missed on something with a couple, and we talked about it afterwards. And just, I hate that. I hate when I miss like that.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that was guilt and shame in that.
Yeah.
And then let's see, what have I got still? Hurt. I think that hurt is usually between the two of us, but I don't think about that. I don't think there was any of that yesterday, or this morning or anything. But so I would say, just even experiencing your hurt, when you see, like, when your mom is off and not in her normal, she's a very independent person, a very busy person normally. And so to be so needy yesterday, but then that does bring up old hurts, and even seeing you just and how that relationship has over the years. And, and we told a lot of stories yesterday, because you just start to do that. And then that brings up old hurts for sure. Did I cover them all?
Very
so.
close.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know so many people can relate to that are caring for their parents right now. My dad is living with his mom, and I just being a caretaker, whether they're tiny humans or, in their 90s, like that affects so much of your emotion. And if you're not able to process it with each other, then you come home and you're short with your spouse, and they think, oh, you're mad at me over something. It's like, no, you're just carrying a load.
Yeah.
And so to be able to process that helps you stay connected through it.
Well, it was really beautiful yesterday. And even this morning, I called my son. Yesterday I talked to I talked to all of our girls, and I just cried in every phone call talking about my mom.
Yeah.
Even though it was Glenn's mom we were taking care of, it took me back to that time 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And so then I just cried with each of them. But I'm so thankful because that's not who I have been. Like I have held that. And just in the last decade of my life, I've learned to actually in the moment call and just do that, just cry.
Yeah.
And, and it's such a beautiful thing because it allows my kids to love me well.
Yeah.
When in that moment, I don't wait for the moment to pass. Like, well, I'll tell them later that I felt like crying. I actually call in the moment so that I can cry and experience that with them and let them see that part of me. And they're beautiful connection coders. They me beautifully. They make space for it. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm thankful that I've learned to become that person, who will call in those moments and will cry.
100%. And as someone who has a parent, like I would be the kid in that situation. There's so often that I'll talk to my mom later and she's like, well, this happened yesterday. And I'm like, why didn't you call me? Like, it's painful for me as the kid. Like for the parents listening, like your adult children want to walk with you and be with you in those moments. Yes. So I think but it takes bravery for you to make that phone call. And so you can go to our website if you're like, okay, I need help identifying these emotions within myself because I think I'm carrying it around and it's actually affecting my relationships, because I'm not processing. You can go to our website and download the Core Emotion Wheel, watch the video, read the instructions, because there are instructions to how to do this effectively. So you're creating safe space for each other.
Right.
Because if there's not safety there for the other person to share, they will stop sharing with you.
Right.
And so you need to learn how to do it correctly. So go to our website or Google Core Emotion Wheel, connection codes. It's big enough now. You can Google that and find it easily.
Right. Yeah.
And we are so glad you're here. Yesterday, we got our end of the year updates for our podcast. And we, at the Connection Codes, are in the top 5% of podcast shared worldwide.
Wow.
So we're that high. That means that you listening are sharing. And we could see how many of you are sharing through text, through social media, through email. Guys, that is huge. It is huge for us. Like that's such a joy point. But also like you're impacting your friends. Like you are telling people, I care about you. So you need to hear this because I want you to thrive in your relationships in your life. And so thank you for sharing, for all of your reviews that you come on. I didn't pull one up today to share a review from somebody. I should have done that. I will do better. But thank you for those reviews. And we do this because...
Yeah. Well, I just have to add real quickly that over the Black Friday weekend, we reached some new countries. And that's just so big to us, which, we're in over 50 countries now because you shared it with somebody who shared it with somebody who shared it with somebody. And I just encourage you, plead with you, challenge you, whatever, literally right now at the end of this podcast, text 5 people and say, hey, check this out. Because that begins multiplying and it's just unbelievable. And we really are on a global quest to change this because you need this.
You deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.